Chapter 1. Rosewood and the Sorrow of Julian Hayes. On the crest of a deep green hill where the cold wind carries the fresh scent of the forest, Rosewood Manor stands tall like a solitary castle amidst the wild nature. The ancient stone slabs paving the path, the marble angel statues, and the intricately wrought iron gates all still retain the solemn grandeur of a bygone golden era. Rosewood was once not only the pride of the Hayes family, but also a beacon of beauty for the entire suburb. Its splendor, as people often said, was a blend of brilliant design and Julian Hayes' profound love for Charlotte, his beloved wife. That spring, Rosewood's garden was vibrant like a living painting. Climbing roses adorned the window frames, lavender beds stretched along the paths, and the fountain at the center of the courtyard shimmered under the sunlight. Charlotte loved her garden. She often told Julian that it was her second heart. But now Rosewood is no longer a symbol of life. Since the day Charlotte died in a tragic car accident, everything here has come to a standstill, as if time itself had ceased with her final breath. The garden is now desolate. The once vibrant flower beds are overrun with weeds. The roses have withered, the trees are charred black, and the statues around the fountain are moss-covered, cold and crumbling with age. The manor is shrouded in darkness. The grand chandelier in the hall no longer lights up at night, and heavy wine-colored curtains block every window, shutting out the outside light as if Julian were trying to hide from the world. As for Julian Hayes, the master of Rosewood, he quietly became a faint shadow of his former self. Julian Hayes, in his youth, was the epitome of success. With deep-set eyes, a high-nosed bridge, and sharp facial features, Julian possessed not only immense wealth, but also significant influence in the real estate industry. From lavish parties to board meetings, Julian was always the first to arrive, exuding an impeccable and flawless appearance. When Charlotte entered his life, everything seemed more complete. Charlotte was not only his wife, but also the essential piece that helped Julian see life through a gentler lens. But after Charlotte's death, everything collapsed. Julian vanished from meetings, declined invitations from friends, and severed most social ties. He secluded himself in the manor, allowing Rosewood to sink into silence and decay. No longer was Julian seen in elegant suits. Instead, he appeared in old shirts, standing quietly for hours on the balcony, his gaze fixed on the lifeless garden below. He did not touch anything that belonged to Charlotte. Her belongings in the bedroom remained untouched, from the white dress hanging on the rack to the journal by the piano. Julian never stepped into that room again. Every time he passed the tightly shut door, he felt as though he could hear Charlotte's voice. Soft, gentle, but so distant it was unreachable. Eleanor, Rosewood's loyal housekeeper, was the only one who stayed. She had witnessed Julian from his days as a passionate young man to becoming a withdrawn and cold figure. She continued to clean the greenhouse every day, even though no one used it anymore. The garden, where Charlotte once planted white roses, now held only cracked glass frames and dry soil. "Master Julian, the garden cannot remain this way forever," Eleanor gently said one morning. "Charlotte is gone. Don't try to hold on to anything." But Julian remained silent. When Eleanor suggested hiring a new gardener to restore Rosewood, Julian coldly refused. No one can replace Charlotte. And so things continued until one day, a young woman appeared at Rosewood's gate carrying a silver necklace engraved with the initials CH, a keepsake of Charlotte's that Julian never expected. From that moment, the wheels of fate at Rosewood began to turn once more. Welcome to Soul Stories. Today we bring you a heartwarming tale. Let us know which city you're tuning in from around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to catch more meaningful stories. Chapter 2. Emma Bennett Appears, the one who rekindles hope. The sun gradually set behind the trees, casting long shadows over the path leading to Rosewood Manor. The birdsong faded in the chill of twilight. Emma Bennett stood quietly before the grand iron gate, her eyes fixed on the somber manor in the distance. When Emma was little, her mother used to tell her about a woman with gentle eyes and a voice as soft as the spring breeze. That woman had helped their family during difficult times, paying for hospital bills, leaving baskets of flowers on their porch during holidays, and sending anonymous letters of encouragement. It wasn't until her mother passed away that Emma learned the woman's name, Charlotte Hayes. Now holding a silver necklace engraved with the initials CH, Emma knew she could wait no longer. She took a deep breath and pushed open the gate. In the large kitchen of Rosewood, Eleanor sat embroidering by the light of an oil lamp, when a soft knock echoed at the door. The elderly housekeeper set aside her needle and thread, cautiously stepping to the entrance. Before her stood a young woman with bright eyes and a face showing traces of exhaustion after a long day. "I'm sorry for coming so late. I'm Emma Bennett, the one who wrote about the gardening position here." Eleanor looked the girl up and down, her eyes carrying a hint of doubt. "Are you sure you want to work here? This manor isn't like other places." Emma smiled, but her hands unconsciously tightened around the necklace in her coat pocket. "I heard this garden was once beautiful. I'd like to try." Eleanor narrowed her eyes slightly, as if sensing something hidden in Emma's response. "Do you have any experience with gardening?" Emma nodded. "I've taken care of many gardens for families around the area. I love plants." "I know," Eleanor sighed, "but this garden isn't just about flowers and greenery, my dear. It holds many memories." Emma said nothing, but her gaze drifted toward the manor grounds, where withered trees and lifeless rose bushes stood still. "I want to bring it back to life." Eleanor remained silent for a few moments, then quietly invited Emma into the kitchen. The next morning in the dimly lit drawing room, Julian Hayes sat silently at a large wooden table, holding a glass of wine but not drinking. The wind slipped through the window crevices, carrying the faint scent of the garden. Eleanor entered, gently placing a cup of tea in front of him. "A young woman has come asking for the gardener's position," she said slowly, her eyes never leaving Julian's withdrawn face. Julian didn't look up. "I don't need anyone to tend that garden." "Master Julian, I know what you're thinking, but that garden was Charlotte's world. She wouldn't want to see it wither away." Julian's grip tightened slightly, his eyes cold. "Charlotte isn't here anymore, Eleanor." "But her memory is," Eleanor replied softly, her voice carrying the quiet resolve of someone who had been with the Hayes family for decades. Silence filled the room for several minutes. "Who is she?" Julian asked reluctantly. "Emma Bennett, a young woman. She seems trustworthy." Julian took a sip of tea, his gaze drifting toward the garden outside, where the dead rose bushes stood still under the sun. "Fine. If she can endure a week there, let her stay." Eleanor gave a slight nod and left, leaving Julian alone in the quiet room. That afternoon, Emma officially began her work at Rosewood. She walked through the withered flower beds, her fingers brushing against the leafless rose bushes. Before her, the vast garden lay shrouded in the gray of weeds and fallen leaves. But in Emma's heart, she didn't see desolation. She saw Charlotte's presence in every petal and every corner of the garden. "I promise I will make this garden bloom again," Emma whispered, as if making a vow to herself and to the woman who once extended a helping hand to her in the past. Chapter 3. Reviving the Garden. The First Signs of Change. The morning sun shone through the tall trees, casting light over the withered grass of Rosewood. Emma Bennett stood in the vast garden, holding a small spade, her determined gaze fixed on the lifeless rose beds. She knew it would take far longer than she imagined to restore this garden, but that did not deter Emma. Starting with the flower beds near the path, she carefully pruned the branches, removed wilted blooms, and cleared the ground of fallen leaves. Day by day, Emma's hands gradually brought life to small corners of the garden. The gravel paths, once hidden beneath dense weeds, slowly emerged under the sunlight. Julian Hayes never ventured near the garden. He would only watch from a distance, through the study window on the second floor, observing her quietly. Since Charlotte's death, Julian had never allowed anyone to step into the garden his wife had cherished. But this time, he did not stop Emma. As the days passed, Julian found himself unable to look away from Emma's small figure beneath the sun. Her meticulousness, patience, and passion for her work gradually drew his attention, though Julian tried to feign indifference. One afternoon, a sudden heavy rain swept over Rosewood. The sky darkened, and strong winds shook the old branches in the garden. From inside the house, Eleanor frowned as she saw Emma still working. Emma knelt beside the rose beds, carefully trimming away dead branches. The cold rain soaked through her clothes, her hair drenched, but she did not stop. From the second-floor window, Julian stood silently, his reflection faintly visible on the glass. He saw Emma, a sight that reminded him of Charlotte. On rainy days, Charlotte would wrap herself in a scarf and tend to the flowers with a gentle smile. Julian tightened his grip on the glass of wine. "She's stubborn," he muttered, but his gaze never left the garden. When Emma finally stood, holding a bundle of cut roses in her arms, she glanced up and caught sight of Julian's silhouette behind the curtain. But as she blinked, he was gone. The next day, while clearing the far end of the garden, Emma discovered a dense bush concealing a stone statue. Beneath the overgrown weeds, the statue lay hidden in the shadows, as if waiting to be found. Emma gently brushed aside the dry leaves covering the statue. As sunlight touched it, she saw it was a small angel cradling a heart. Though covered in moss, the statue retained its delicate and pure beauty. "What is this?" Emma murmured, wiping away the dirt with her hand. As soon as she touched the statue, a gravelly voice spoke behind her. "Don't touch it." Emma startled and turned to see Julian standing there. He wasn't wearing a coat, and his hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had just woken from a long dream. His eyes betrayed emotion as they rested on the statue. "I'm sorry, I didn't know it was important," Emma said, lowering her hand and stepping back. Julian approached, his gaze lingering on the statue as if seeing Charlotte through it. "It was a gift for Charlotte on our first wedding anniversary," he said quietly, as though recalling distant memories. Emma listened in silence. "She loved it so much that she placed it at the center of the garden, but after she passed, I couldn't bear to look at it anymore." Emma lowered her head, a wave of empathy rising within her. "The garden will be more beautiful with it here," she said gently, her eyes steady. Julian furrowed his brows slightly but said nothing. He stood there for a long time before turning to leave. From that day on, Julian began appearing in the garden more frequently. He never directly helped Emma, but every time she looked up, Julian's presence was near, sometimes just standing from afar and observing. When Emma replanted the rose beds, Julian stood silently by the pathway, his hand resting on the iron fence. When she cleaned the angel statue, he strolled around the garden, his eyes following her every move. Emma didn't mind Julian's presence, but deep down, she knew that Rosewood was slowly awakening. And Julian, the man burdened by grief for 2 years, was beginning to find light among the roses she tended. One morning, as Emma watered the plants, Julian unexpectedly spoke. "Thank you for what you've done." Emma paused and turned to him. "I'm just doing my job." You've done more than that." Julian stepped closer, and for the first time, Emma saw a faint glimmer in his eyes she hadn't noticed before. The garden wasn't the only thing being revived. So was Julian Hayes's heart. Chapter 4. Victor Carrington, The Arrival of Danger. That morning, the sky over Rosewood was unusually clear. Gentle sunlight filtered through the tree canopy, reflecting off the small garden pond. Emma knelt beside the newly planted rose beds, carefully tending to the fragile young plants. The sound of an engine echoed from afar, shattering the peaceful silence. A sleek black Bentley slowly made its way up the gravel path leading to the manor. Emma looked up, curiosity flickering in her eyes. The car door opened, and Victor Carrington stepped out. He was a man with a refined appearance, but his sharp gaze hid behind a practiced, artificial smile. His tailored gray suit and neatly styled hair made him seem more suited for extravagant parties than a quiet morning at an old manor. Julian Hayes emerged from the manor, his eyes narrowing as he saw Victor. "Victor, I don't recall inviting you here," Julian said, his tone cool and laced with caution. Victor offered a slight smile, stepping forward to shake Julian's hand. "I thought I'd pay an old friend a visit, and while I'm here, I have a business proposal you might find hard to refuse." Emma paused, quietly observing from a distance. When Victor's gaze drifted over the garden, she sensed something unsettling. "And who is this gardener?" Victor asked, his eyes lingering on Emma. She could feel the scrutiny in Victor's gaze, as if he were assessing her rather than simply being curious. "Emma Bennett. She works here," Julian replied, his voice tightening as he noticed Victor's lingering stare. "Interesting," Victor said with a smirk. "Rosewood seems to be changing more than I expected." Emma lowered her head and resumed her work, but the weight of Victor's gaze lingered long after he turned away. Inside the manor, as Victor and Julian moved to the sitting room to talk, Eleanor swiftly pulled Emma aside. Her voice was low and firm. "Be careful around Victor," Eleanor warned, her hand gently squeezing Emma's. Worry flickered in her eyes. "He's not someone to be trusted." Emma glanced at Eleanor, her brow furrowed. "I felt that the moment he arrived." Eleanor sighed, her gaze drifting toward the slightly ajar door of the sitting room where Victor and Julian were speaking. Victor was once Julian's business partner, but after Charlotte's death, everything changed, Eleanor said, lowering her voice even further. "I suspect he had something to do with the accident." Emma's eyes widened, but Eleanor shook her head. "There's no clear evidence, but he always seems to appear when Julian is at his most vulnerable." Emma nodded, her expression growing thoughtful. That afternoon, after Victor left the manor, Emma was watering the roses when she noticed Julian standing nearby. "What did he want?" Emma asked, unable to hide her curiosity. Julian remained silent for a moment, his eyes distant as he gazed toward the woods beyond the manor. "Victor is always after power. He wants me to join an investment project, but I don't trust him." Emma set down the watering can. "Eleanor doesn't trust him either. She believes he may have been involved in Charlotte's death." Julian's hand tightened into a fist. "I believe so too," he admitted, his eyes meeting Emma's with a weariness that couldn't be hidden. "That's why I won't let him near this garden. Charlotte loved this place, and I won't let Victor destroy it again." Emma nodded, feeling the resolve in Julian's voice. That evening, as the lights in the manor began to dim, Emma walked down the long hallway toward her room, but as she passed the large window overlooking the garden, she paused. Outside in the faint darkness, a figure stood near the manor gate. It wasn't Julian or Eleanor. It was Victor. He lingered there for a long time, his gaze fixed on the garden as if searching for something. A chill ran through Emma as she pulled the curtain closed and hurried away from the window. She knew Victor's presence wasn't just a simple business visit. Chapter 5. Buried Secrets. Charlotte's Letter. Autumn gradually settled over Rosewood, and the garden began to show signs of transformation. The newly planted white roses bloomed quietly but vibrantly, as if trying to dispel the lingering heaviness over the estate. Emma Bennett spent most of her time in the garden or around the abandoned greenhouse at the edge of the property. The greenhouse had once been Charlotte Hayes' sanctuary, where she spent hours tending to rare flowers. But after her death, the doors had been sealed shut, leaving the plants inside to wither under layers of dust and neglect. That day, as the afternoon sun faded through the cracked glass panes, Emma decided to clean out the greenhouse. Eleanor had mentioned restoring it several times, but Julian always refused. "Charlotte wouldn't want anyone touching this place," he had said. Stepping inside, Emma was met with the cold, stale air of a place long forgotten. Old pots, rusted gardening tools, and ivy-covered walls evoked both nostalgia and an eerie sense of abandonment. While clearing a corner, Emma noticed a broken flower pot tucked away. She knelt down, gently shifting the dry soil inside, when her fingers brushed against a folded, yellowed piece of paper. Emma picked it up, brushing away the dust. It was a letter. Opening it, Charlotte's delicate handwriting emerged under the faint light. "My dearest Julian, Victor comes by too often. He watches the garden, and I feel as though I'm being followed. Sometimes I see him standing outside the greenhouse, but when I step out, he's gone. I don't want to overthink this, but something doesn't feel right. If anything happens to me, remember that I love you. And this garden." Emma tightened her grip on the letter, her heart pounding. "Victor?" The name sent a chill down her spine. Eleanor had warned her about Victor Carrington. Now, with suspicions mounting, Emma felt as though she had stumbled upon a long-buried secret. For a brief moment, Emma recalled what her mother had once told her, that Charlotte Hayes had been the woman who helped their family in times of need. Gratitude and a sense of obligation compelled Emma to dig deeper. That evening, Emma brought the letter to Julian. The large study was dimly lit by a single desk lamp. Julian sat alone, his eyes lost in an old journal spread before him. When Emma knocked and entered, Julian barely glanced up before returning to his reading. "I found something I think you should see," Emma said, placing the letter on the table, her voice calm but firm. Julian's eyes flickered to the paper, his brow furrowing as he recognized the familiar handwriting. "This is..." Julian picked up the letter, and as he read the first few lines, his expression darkened. He stood abruptly, his hand gripping the letter tightly, crumpling it at the edges. "Where did you find this?" Julian's voice was tense, laced with anger and unease. Emma met his gaze without hesitation. "I found it in the greenhouse while cleaning. Charlotte wrote this to you, and I thought you should know." Julian took a deep breath, his hand trembling slightly as he placed the letter back on the table. "I told Eleanor that no one was to touch the greenhouse." "I'm sorry, but Julian, you can't keep ignoring this. Charlotte sensed something was wrong, and Victor was part of it." Julian turned his back to Emma, his eyes fixed on the large window overlooking the garden. His chest rose and fell as he struggled to contain the storm of emotions, threatening to break free. "The past shouldn't be disturbed, Emma. You don't understand," he said, his voice raw with pain. Emma hesitated but then softly replied, "I may not understand, but I know Charlotte wanted you to find the truth." Julian didn't respond. He stood in silence as Emma quietly left the study, leaving him alone in the heavy stillness. That night, Julian sat alone in his study. The desk lamp still glowed faintly, but the glass of wine beside him had long gone cold. He held Charlotte's letter in his hands, reading her words over and over. "Victor comes by too often." Charlotte's warning echoed in his mind. For 2 years, Julian had tried to bury these memories, believing that forgetting would ease the pain. But the truth was, nothing could erase the past. Julian's eyes hardened. "Victor, if you were behind this, I won't let it go unpunished." Chapter 6. Confronting Victor. The Road to Truth. That afternoon, the sky over Rosewood darkened, with cold winds rustling through the tall trees. Emma stood in the garden, her worried gaze fixed on the grand house, where Julian was preparing for his confrontation with Victor Carrington. Julian had never been one to show his emotions easily, but ever since Emma gave him Charlotte's letter, he had spoken little to anyone. He was lost in his own thoughts, meticulously revisiting shadows of the past he had long chosen to ignore. The next day, Victor Carrington returned to Rosewood. The black Bentley parked before the manor's entrance. Victor stepped out, his demeanor calm as if this meeting was nothing more than a casual afternoon tea between old friends. His eyes drifted over the old Hayes family portraits hanging in the hallway as he entered the sitting room. Julian sat in the center of the room, with Charlotte's letter resting on the dark wooden table before him. The fireplace crackled softly, but it did little to ease the tension filling the space. "Julian!" Victor greeted him with a nod, his ever-present half-smile lingering. "You were eager to see me. What's so urgent?" Julian didn't answer, simply sliding the letter across the table toward Victor. "What do you make of this?" Victor glanced down at the letter, a flicker of surprise flashing in his eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. He leaned back in his chair, the usual composure settling over his face. "Charlotte always had an overactive imagination. She worried too much about things that didn't matter," Victor said, chuckling lightly. "You're reading too much into this, Julian." "Am I?" Julian arched a brow, his gaze sharper than ever. He stood and retrieved a small plastic bag from the desk drawer, holding it up for Victor to see. Inside was a worn fragment of metal. "What about this? Emma found this in the garage. It's a fragment of Charlotte's brake system." Victor's eyes narrowed, but he maintained his outward calm. "You're talking about Charlotte's accident?" "Julian, it was just that, an accident. Even the police didn't find anything suspicious." Julian's hands tightened into fists. "I've let this lie for 2 years, but it seems I missed important details. I reviewed the old security footage from the garage, and you were the only person who entered it before the accident." Victor remained silent. The smile that had once curled his lips slowly faded. "You cut her brakes," Julian said, his voice low but filled with barely contained rage, "and you thought no one would find out." The room fell into a heavy silence. Victor met Julian's gaze, but the discomfort was evident. "I didn't intend to kill Charlotte," Victor admitted at last. "You were the target, Julian." Julian froze, his eyes hardening. "So, you were after me?" His voice trembled, uncertain whether from anger or grief. Victor exhaled slowly, breaking eye contact. "You know why?" he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "That major project years ago, You cut me out of it. I lost millions, and you never looked back. Charlotte was collateral damage. Julian's eyes darkened. Collateral damage? He laughed bitterly, but there was no humor in the sound, only overwhelming pain. You just confessed to murder, and that's how you describe the death of my wife? Victor rose, making his way toward the door. What do you want, Julian? The police? No one will believe you. There's no concrete evidence. As Victor's hand touched the door handle, Julian's voice rang out, resolute. You'll pay for this. Victor turned slightly, but this time, Julian's gaze held no hesitation or grief. It was the gaze of a man prepared to face his betrayer head-on. Are you still following the story? If yes, comment Coca-Cola. Ha ha. Chapter 7. Emma reveals the truth, bridging the past and present. The evening sun bathed Rosewood's garden in golden light, illuminating the freshly bloomed roses. After the storm of truth and loss, the estate finally returned to its peaceful state. Birds chirped softly from the treetops, as if the garden was awakening from a long slumber. Victor Carrington had been arrested. Julian personally handed over Charlotte's letter and the garage footage to the police, putting an end to 2 years of lingering suspicion. Though the truth brought him pain, when Julian looked at Emma, the person who had helped him piece his life back together, he felt a sense of relief. That afternoon, Emma stood in the garden, holding a basket filled with freshly cut white roses. She slowly walked along the pathway, stopping by the fountain that had been cleared of moss. Julian appeared, quietly observing Emma from a distance. The way she tended to the garden reminded him of Charlotte, yet there was something different, gentle but strong in her own way. The garden looks beautiful, Julian said, breaking the silence. Emma turned, offering a soft smile. Thank you, but I think it was always beautiful. I just helped to bring it back to life. Julian stepped closer, his eyes lingering on the blooming roses. He knelt, gently brushing his fingers against the petals. Charlotte used to say this garden was the soul of Rosewood. I think she was right. Emma looked at Julian for a long moment, as if wrestling with her thoughts. Finally, she took a deep breath and set the basket down. There's something I need to tell you about why I came here. Julian's gaze met hers, patient but curious. Emma reached into her coat pocket, pulling out a simple silver necklace. Engraved on the pendant were 2 familiar initials, C.H. Charlotte Hayes, Julian whispered, his eyes darkening with emotion. Yes. Emma traced the cool surface of the pendant with her finger. This is the only thing my mother left behind. Charlotte helped my family in ways I never fully understood. She was our benefactor. Julian remained still, the wind gently tousling Emma's hair. When my mother fell seriously ill, Charlotte paid for all the hospital bills. I never knew why she did it until I realized. She was the kind of person who quietly helped others without expecting anything in return. Emma's eyes met Julian's, shimmering softly in the fading light. I didn't come here just for a job. I wanted to repay Charlotte in my own way, by restoring the garden she loved. Julian took the necklace in his hand, the cold metal seeping into his skin. Memories of Charlotte flooded back, her radiant smile while planting flowers, the gentle touch of her hand on his shoulder after long days at work. Charlotte always told me that if you could bring happiness to others, it was worth doing, Julian said, his voice thick with emotion. I never knew she helped you and your family, but I'm certain, if she were here, she would be happy knowing you're part of this place. Emma smiled, though tears welled at the corners of her eyes. I believe she's watching over us somehow. Julian tightened his grip on the necklace before carefully placing it around Emma's neck. Charlotte gave this to you, and I think you should keep it. It's been yours all along. Emma gently touched the pendant, feeling the warmth lingering from Julian's hands. Thank you, Julian. The two stood in silence, surrounded by the golden glow of the garden. No words were needed. Both understood that Charlotte's spirit lingered in every petal, every leaf, and in the hearts of those she had touched. Rosewood's revival wasn't just in the garden, but in the bond between past and present, between those who had lost and those who had found light once more. Chapter 8. The Revival of Rosewood. A spring morning at Rosewood was clear and peaceful. Warm sunlight cascaded over the lush green grass, shimmering across the vibrant, blooming roses. The garden, once shrouded in shadows and neglect, now thrived under the tender care of Emma Bennett. Lavender, hydrangeas, and white roses lined the pathways, filling the air with a soft, sweet fragrance. Birds chirped joyfully, their melodies blending with the gentle breeze that carried the scent of life and renewal. Julian Hayes stood on the stone steps leading into the garden, his eyes following Emma as she carefully pruned a rose bush near the fountain. He watched silently, his heart swelling with emotions he couldn't quite put into words. Julian approached Emma. "The garden looks even more beautiful than I imagined," he said, his voice warm and deep in the tranquil air. Emma turned, her hand still holding the pruning shears. She glanced at Julian, her brown eyes calm and steady. "Thank you, but this place revived itself. I just gave it a little help," she replied humbly. Julian glanced around, a soft smile tugging at his lips. "No, Emma, I think you've done more than that. You haven't just revived the garden, you've revived me." Emma paused, her heart skipping a beat at his words. She didn't look directly at Julian, but a faint blush crept across her cheeks. "Sometimes a garden isn't revived by hands alone, but by heart," she said softly, carefully gathering fallen petals from the pathway. Julian stood still, letting her words settle within him. "Charlotte would be proud of you, Emma," he said, his eyes glimmering with gratitude. "And so am I." Emma looked up, meeting Julian's sincere gaze. They stood together amidst the blossoming garden, feeling the quiet yet undeniable bond growing between them. The following day, Julian invited Emma and Eleanor to lunch in the garden. A table was set beneath the shade of an old oak tree, Charlotte's favorite spot for morning tea and flower gazing. "I think it's time to open Rosewood for charity events, just like Charlotte always wanted," Julian said as he poured tea. "Will you help me?" Emma smiled, tilting her head thoughtfully. "I'd be honored." On the day of Rosewood's first festival, the garden opened its gates to visitors from all over the town. Children laughed and played around the fountain. Guests strolled along the flower-lined paths, and joyful chatter filled the air. Emma stood beside Julian, watching the lively scene unfold. "I think Charlotte is smiling somewhere, seeing all of this," Emma whispered. Julian nodded, his fingers lightly brushing the silver necklace Emma wore. "I believe you're the reason Rosewood feels alive again," he said gently. "And so am I." Emma smiled, her eyes glowing with quiet happiness. Like this garden, sometimes people need someone to step into their lives and pull them out of the darkness. Julian took her hand, his grip gentle but firm. "Rosewood has been revived, and thanks to you, so have I." They stood together beneath the golden sunlight, surrounded by colors, laughter, and hope. Rosewood was no longer just an estate. It had become a symbol of love, gratitude, and the revival of hearts long dormant in the shadows of the past. Chapter 9. A Happy Ending. That afternoon, the golden hues of sunset stretched across Rosewood's garden, casting a warm glow over the blooming white roses. Emma trimmed the lavender near the fountain, petals gently falling around her feet, painting a scene of peaceful serenity. Julian stood nearby, silently watching. In his hand was a small silver box. A soft breeze carried the garden's delicate fragrance, one he hadn't felt in so long, not since Charlotte's passing. Julian stepped closer, his voice breaking the quiet. "Emma." Emma looked up, her soft smile lighting up when she saw him. "Yes?" He hesitated for a moment, his gaze drifting over the flower beds Charlotte once adored. The memory of Charlotte still lingered, woven into the very fabric of the garden. Yet Emma's presence didn't erase it. Instead, it blended harmoniously, bringing a quiet sense of peace. Julian reached into his pocket and opened the silver box, revealing a simple but elegant platinum ring that shimmered in the fading sunlight. "Emma, there's something I've thought about for a long time, and I know I can't keep it to myself any longer." Emma's eyes widened in surprise, her gaze fixed on the ring. "I know I once loved someone else, and I don't want to hide that from you. Charlotte was part of my life, but you stepped in and gave me something new. Not as a replacement, but as a chance to start again. Emma remained silent, her eyes glistening with emotion as the light of dusk enveloped them. Julian knelt before her, his hands trembling slightly. I want us to care for this garden together. Emma Bennett, will you marry me? Tears welled up in Emma's eyes. She looked at Julian, feeling the sincerity in every word he spoke. Julian, I will. Julian smiled, slipping the ring onto her finger. As he stood, Emma wrapped her arms around him, and beneath the blossoming garden, they shared a kiss. Gentle, unhurried, but full of meaning. Their wedding took place on a bright summer day, as Rosewood's garden basked in full bloom. Emma walked down an aisle strewn with white rose petals, Charlotte's favorite flowers. Julian waited by the fountain where he and Charlotte had spent countless cherished moments. But today he embraced the past, letting it intertwine with the present to create a new beginning. Before the ceremony, Julian and Emma shared a quiet moment by Charlotte's grave, placing a wreath of white flowers beside it. Charlotte, I think you'd smile seeing this garden come back to life. You'll always be part of this place, and I'll never forget you, Julian whispered, holding Emma's hand as they stood before the headstone. Emma bowed her head, her heart full yet calm. I believe she'd be happy knowing you found light again. The ceremony continued, filled with warmth and meaning. Emma, dressed in a simple white gown, stepped forward to meet Julian, her gaze never leaving his. I'm not here to replace anyone, Julian, but I promise to walk with you from now on, she said softly. Julian gently clasped her hands, his eyes tender. And I promise to love you, as I love Charlotte, wholeheartedly. Under the watchful eyes of friends, family, and the vibrant garden, they exchanged vows, marking the beginning of a new chapter. The reception was held in the garden, where sunlight filtered through the canopy, casting a warm glow over the guests. Julian took Emma's hand, leading her to a quiet corner as the celebration unfolded around them. Do you regret coming here? Julian asked, his gaze locking with hers. Emma shook her head, lacing her fingers with his. No, I never have. Rosewood isn't just a garden I helped revive. It's where I found you. Julian smiled, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. Thank you, Emma. Thank you for staying. Beneath the gentle moonlight of Rosewood, they walked hand in hand along the path lined with blooming white roses, where past and present intertwined, guiding them toward a future full of hope. The story of Julian and Emma at Rosewood stands as a testament to the power of love and patience. Even after loss, hearts can be rekindled, with sincerity, understanding, and care. Julian learned to cherish Charlotte's memory without shutting out the happiness life still had to offer. Emma, through gratitude and compassion, brought light back into his life. Their story carries the message that love and hope are the keys to overcoming grief and rediscovering peace. Thank you for following this story. Please rate it from 1 to 5 stars, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our Soul Stories channel. Your support is the motivation for us to continue bringing more great stories. Ha ha ha.